Okay, and we're back with Chris and Blair on NASA Edge.
Brought to you by ESMD.
Our proud sponsor. Got a lot of cool things to talk about in the show today. We have a interview with a NASA researcher.
Yes, Pat Cosgrove is a good buddy of mine who works in the EFP Directorate with me. Will talk to us about the vision for space exploration.
Excellent. And we'll be taking some calls, maybe giving away some prizes, and also talking about our bigger competition.
We have the first ever podcast competition, the Space Exploration Podcast Competition.
I can see Blair in the camera kind of holding his head like that. That is the first ever NASA Edge episode. I actually had to dig around for that. They don't put that on their site, but it is in their Facebook profile, so I found that. Blair, welcome to the show. So, first off, who are you? I mean, why does anyone care? Who are you?
Well, like your wife, I'm an outsider. I'm not a traditional NASA person per se in the science sense. I'm more of a production guy, and I came to NASA a few years ago to do educational programming. And when we finished that up, Chris, who you saw there in the video, we were having a creative meeting, and we just still wanted to figure out a way in which we could do something about NASA in terms of outreach in a show setting that would be fun and not so scripted and
right.
For lack of a better word, more of a public relations kind of thing or a so regulated thing. We just wanted something more conversational, something more natural and organic that would promote NASA. So that's how we came up with NASA Edge, and I'm laughing because, yes, that is the pilot. That's what we used to pitch the show, which is very funny. So anyway, thanks for bringing up some old wounds.
Oh, no problem. And the show is actually very different. You got a totally different open now.
Yes.
You've really flushed out the format of the show. It feels like you've got a pretty good shtick going on at this point. I mean, you really have a great dynamic in the show, I think.
For sure.
Well, what's really cool is Chris. He's worked at NASA for a while, but he's before he worked at NASA, he was an educator. And so even, apart from the show, my relationship with Chris, he's always been very educational and helpful and knowledgeable about NASA. And we would just, talk about things. And he knows people, and he knows all about the different programs. And I was just soaking it up. I was like, wow, how do you know all this stuff? And, of course, that helped with the dynamic. It helped with how we construct the shows. Thanks. I'm glad. I hope it comes across well. But yeah, it is quite a shtick. In fact, we were talking with one fella out at NASA Glenn, Dick DeLombard, and we actually had an activity. And I was trying to figure out some properties of acceleration on roller coasters for NASA Physics Day, and I was like picking which rides were associated with which properties. And he looked at me and he's like, Blair, you're actually pretty smart. It was funny. He was like, I can't believe you figured this out. And I was like, because he only knew me from the show, and so
awesome.
We do have a good time, but it's a lot of fun.
When watching the show, it feels like the three of you really know each other and have known each other and been friends for many years. Is that actually the case, or did you just kind of come together for NASA Edge itself?
Well, like Franklin, for example, I worked with for years.
Mm-hmm.
We've worked on productions at NASA since about 2001. And whereas I knew Chris and I knew who he was, and I had meetings with him and stuff, didn't really start working with him closely till NASA Edge. But Franklin also worked with Chris for years on other productions. So we're all kind of tied together, and of course Ron, who is our director / cameraman / editor / everything, he's worked with all of us as well. So we did have a lot of camaraderie, which actually helps, because when you try to do something crazy or you try to do something a little different, you kind of have to rely on them to make sure you don't go too far, or
Right.
you're not too nuts, because I have suggested some pretty crazy things, and they've protected me in many ways, and they've protected you as well.
Yeah, it seems like a really fun group of people, and it is very educational, and just the fact that you guys have so much fun, it comes across as just an interesting way to present the same information, because and maybe you're free to disagree, but I think a lot of people have kind of lost interest in space travel, and presenting it in a new, fun, and outgoing and energetic way will hopefully, kind of light a fire underneath them and go, actually, yeah, this is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I like too about what you said in your open of your show, talking about your wife being, she's sort of the me in this relationship, although I don't want to explore that too much. That's kind of weird. But what's really cool is, when we go out and we do a show, I'm the outsider, but I'm meeting with some of these NASA folk for the first time and learning things, and that's not staged. I mean, we'll go into meetings, and like we met with Paul Young, Paul Marshall on the Constellation program, and I'd had some ideas about why NASA was where they are, and yet he sort of laid out some thoughts on Constellation and things that I hadn't considered about where we are with the space program, and so I try to take that and then bring that to the show, and it really helps. I mean, I think that I grew up and was very enthusiastic about the space program, and have seen it sort of. I don't want to say diminish. I would say it's so broad now. It encompasses so much more that it's hard to cover all the aspects that
Right.
in technology and in exploration and other things that NASA's involved in. There's just so much, So I'm actually happy to have Constellation where I can be a little bit more focused, because
Right.
it's immense. I mean, they're just we were talking yesterday. We're laying out our schedule, and we've got shows from here through next year, and we are running out of time already, and
Wow.
we've got still other things we're learning about. So
Awesome.
it's great.
So what brought you to NASA? How did you originally start at NASA? Because it sounds like you kind of did some projects before you started NASA Edge at NASA, but what was the initial thing that got you in the door there?
Well, actually, Ron, who was the director, was working on a show called the NASA Sci-Files, which was an educational program for 3rd to 5th graders. I was working with METV and the NFL, and I'd hired Ron before years ago, freelance. And so I guess they were looking for somebody, and he remembered me and called me up and asked me if I'd be interested. And of course, it's hard to not be interested in NASA. I didn't know a lot, but even as a kid, it holds a lot of emotion, cool
Right.
stuff. And I'm a Star Wars fan. I make no bones about that. So anyway, I thought it would be really cool. So I went and interviewed and got a job producing the Sci-Files, which I loved. And even though that was more educational, you were doing things with NASA all the time, and highlighting all the things they were doing. So that was exciting. I did that for several years.
Wow.